Hey everyone, tonight's video is going to be more so how I originally intended the video logs of mine to be. So it'll be less of a storytelling video and more of a conversation or a topic. So tonight I'm going to try to untangle this ball of yarn that has blended all together in the, I guess you can call it the New Age community. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started real quick. If you haven't done a lot of research on these subjects, it's not going to make a lot of sense, but if you have, I'm hoping to add some clarity. Again, this is just my personal opinion, and this is my belief system at the moment. And it's good to note that when you watch videos like this, that no one has the answers regardless of what they want to believe. And if they think that, it's a lot of ego and they're not really speaking from their higher self. So keep an open mind, and I'll get started right now. So basically, we have a bunch of stuff as far as the Starseed conversations go. You're going to hear a lot about reptilians. And a lot of the New Age sites have the reptilians being the satanic bloodline, and there are current world leaders in the Vatican, and da-da-da-da-da. I just want to take the word reptilian and the David Icke aspect and just remove it right now. Just forget about it. We'll go back to the Anunnaki, who are our creators. We are genetic experiments, or I shouldn't say experiments. At some point there was experimentation, but we're a genetic creation. And the Anunnaki are what we see in our old records, like the Sumerian records, the cuneiform scripts, or the Bible in Genesis. They are the gods. And then later on we have the major world religions unifying everything into one god. But the Anunnaki instilled their genetic coding into us, and more so some of the creations, the human beings if you will, had a lot higher percentage of their DNA in their blood, and others had a lot less. So this way you would have the shepherds of mankind, you would have these otherworldly beings, the Anunnaki, who I don't believe came from another planet like the Zechariah Sitchin people think. I think Nibiru is not a planet, but a doorway, like to the other world. So you have these mediums, these people who are kind of the go-betweens between them and our current 3D reality. So those people are going to oversee the affairs of men, and they are going to become your god kings. You know, your pharaohs of Egypt. Your divine right to rule comes from that. Your intermarrying within the royal courts to keep the bloodlines pure comes from that, because within that blood lies the genetic coding to access this other world and to have that wisdom to you know, oversee the affairs of humankind and the planet Earth. That in itself is not an evil thing. What happened is it's got convoluted, and people are thinking that like today's world leaders and reptilian satanic bloodlines who run the earth and always have. And let's just think for a minute here. Satanic comes from the character of Enki in the Sumerian cuneiform scripts. So Enki was actually the savior of mankind. He was the one who let us know about the flood, and either genetically stored the creation in vials or whatnot, like it talks about in Genesis of the Grail Kings, and that was the Ark, or, you know, warned mankind about the flood, you know, which is where you get the Noah story from, which isn't to be taken too literally, obviously. But and then you have Enlil, who hated mankind and wanted to wipe them out, and Enlil just wants complete obedience. Those two brothers were always warring, and that's where you get that, you know, the Lucifer versus God, heaven and hell war, fallen angels story and all that. But of course, so Enlil becomes Jehovah, aka the Zeus, the god character, and Enki becomes your your Luciferian aspect. So he's the one who's enlightening mankind, just like the serpent in the garden. And of course, you get the Enlil character punishing the people for that. I don't know what part of human psychology turned around and said, like, most of this planet is going to totally worship the asshole who hates us and bastardize the character who loves us and wants to enlighten us and be our shepherd. I have no idea how that happened. But so good and evil gets reversed, and Enki becomes the underdog, and what happens is this Enki bloodline trickles down into Christ's bloodline. And before that, it was God, all over the place. You have your pharaohs, your Tuatha De Danann from the Irish myths. Oh God, I could go into that, but I'm not going to. You have this definitely elven race, if you will. This fairy tale race of elves or fairies or vampires or mermaids or unicorns, whatever you want to call it. Magical beings that are descended from our creators with that bloodline or that genetic makeup in them. And what's going to happen is they're going to be killed by the Roman Catholic Church. So you have these more primitive human beings with less evolved DNA that are selfish, service to self beings. They become greedy. It becomes a merchant class / banker civilization. The traditions of these beautiful elven race people are stolen and manipulated. So the pagan themes are turned Catholic. You have the masses come from these other versions of masses. So the last thing that we saw of somewhat related to this wisdom was the Celtic, or actually the Druidic, or the Norse beliefs. So everything's very earth-based, and it's a balance between feminine and masculine, and there's a heavy importance placed on interdimensional spiritual realm. And then that all stops with the Roman Catholic Church, and so it becomes all about money and absolute power and just destroying anything that doesn't agree with it, and killing the actual source of all this stuff. So they go on to have the Inquisitions and whatnot. So you have, your burning of the witches at the stake. You have your Cathars who are killed. Your Templars are wiped out. So it's kind of like erasing all that and then rewriting history. And you have the Council of Nicaea, which makes Christ a divine character who's born of the Virgin Mary, who's the Son of God through divine means, who never has any siblings, doesn't get married, anything like that. And so now we have Christ representing Enlil, when in reality a lot of research has been done placing him in the same bloodline as Enki, as well as the biblical Cain. And then you also have the complete cover-up of the marriage to Mary Magdalene and the children and what would later become the Merovingian kings of France. You have the cover-up of the divine aspect altogether. They bastardize her too and make Mary Magdalene a whore, of course. I mean, pretty convenient. So you have a lot of manipulation. History's written by the winners. but it's done in a genius way, and it's done so that everything's inverted and backwards, and who once led mankind has now been replaced to lead mankind into darkness and ignorance. You have evil men and women worshipping an evil being, and that is what is happening to this day still. So when you say, you know, like, people like George Bush are of a satanic bloodline, and, you know, the Queen of England is reptilian, da da da, it's not quite. You're kind of missing the mark. These people, when the donation of Constantine happened, which was a forgery, supposedly he gave all the power to appoint kings and queens to the Catholic Church. He didn't really, it was a forgery, obviously, but what happened is we lose that Enki bloodline. We lose those elves, those fairies, those kings and queens with earthly traditions and feminine worship and things like that. That goes away. So if you're going to liken Enki to Satan, then that aspect is gone. So what you currently have is the Enlil Catholic bloodlines running the world. Corporations, banks, greed, destruction of the earth, that's running the world right now. So everything got switched at some point, and I just wanted to kind of flip that back around and just add some clarity to that. Because of the Enki bloodline, because of all the traditions, it is heavily identified with the dragons, the serpents, which makes sense. That does not mean that it's reptilian and that the reptilians are bad. That's just too easy to categorize like that. I mean, that's left brain. We want to categorize everything, put it in a filing cabinet in its folders, and when you talk about spiritual matters or these occult, new agey subjects, a lot of it is intuition and right brain. So you can't get too carried away with, okay, well, it's reptilian and it's satanic and it's evil and it's gotta go. It's just, it makes it easy for you, I know, and cognitive dissonance makes it really hard to swallow a lot of this stuff, and it's been ground in our psyche for so long, but it's important not to get lost in that. So what's happening, in my opinion, in 2012 is, you know, I don't want to get into the Mayan prophecies and all that stuff. Incidentally, it is the Year of the Dragon in the Chinese calendar, but I feel as though these beings with the right kind of coding in them, genetically or by blood or by ancestral memory, are starting to wake up and want to reclaim the planet and become leaders of a new Earth. So this ties into a lot of the Starseed people, and in the New Age community, I think it's irresponsible to just say like, well, you know, I chose in this lifetime to raise the vibration of the planet, and I'm from the Pleiades, and the soul just popped into this body. I think it's a little bit more complex than that, and I think it really has to do a lot with the genetic coding. Again, this is just my belief, but I think the Rh negative bloodlines have a lot to do with it. Also, you can be Rh negative recessively, so you might be B positive, but your father might have been O negative or something like that. So, you know, I don't know, I call that like Harry Potter being a half-blood or something like that. I also think certain haplogroups are a part of that, certain genes are kind of a giveaway, and this, I'm not trying to sound like Hitler or something like that. I just mean that if you can liken the source, or God or the universe to the ocean, each one of us is like a plastic bottle of water scooping out of that ocean, and that's our current life. It's just that some of these plastic bottles are way, way older, so they carry residue from many, many other trips to the ocean. And the original bottles, to this day, are still here, just in that water being returned to the ocean. It's all playing in to our genetic makeup. So I kind of think that our genetic makeup is the bottle. It's the conduit in which the soul's gonna flow from the source into in this lifetime. When it needs to awaken to save the planet, to save mankind from this, I'm sorry, but ass backwards rule and paradigm it's been in for so long. And this has nothing to do, and I repeat, nothing to do with the color of your skin, your eye color, if you're from this country or that country, what your religion is. That it has to do with genetics and ancestral memory. You know, for instance, my mother, as far back as she knows, is Irish, but when I had her DNA tested, it seems to be more Basque related, or possibly even Finnish or German. I'm not sure, but it goes beyond just saying like, hey, I'm Irish, you know, or I have hazel eyes, so I'm from the Anunnaki. It doesn't work that way. It has to do with ancestral memory and your genetic makeup, I believe, which is why some of us are more evolved than others. And going back to the original overseers of mankind, it's our responsibility now to help guide the planet to do the right thing. So that aspect is waking up in a lot of us in 2012. So we have these creators who may have been interdimensional, or which I believe, or some people believe another star system, and we have these traits that are coming awake. So another thing is, you know, genes and blood at this point in our evolution are so mixed up, and there's so much going on inside of each and everyone's genetic makeup. So I think it's also irresponsible to just say, you know, like, I'm Palladian and I'm a starseed and I'm here to raise the vibration of the earth. I don't think anybody's really, I know for me personally, if you want to liken reptilians to the Anunnaki bloodlines, then I have a very heavy genetic makeup that would be what you would call reptilian. I'm not all that. I'm sure I have some Palladian and some Arcturian or things like that, some Syrian, you know, some of the lion beings in me, who knows. But having that heavy Anunnaki aspect and calling it reptilian would mean that I have a huge amount of reptilian in me. And I know for a fact that I'm a very nice person. I'm not religious, but I have a lot of values and ethics. It is noted that you don't need to be religious to have those, and I'm not sure why so many people think that. I also know that I am very in touch with the earth, very in touch with the feminine aspect. I'm very creative. I'm an artist in many, many different ways, and I'm a kind, gentle soul. So that doesn't sound like your traditional reptilian, does it? So you have to put into account what other makeup you have, and how we were talking about earlier that maybe the David Icke version of reptilians shouldn't necessarily just be categorized as Anunnaki and Satanic. So my studies are going to continue, but at least I have a little bit of a clearer path as to why I am what I am, and why I do the things I do in my job here on the planet, and how my ancestral memory and past lives and genetic makeup and blood and everything tends to tie into that, and how it shouldn't be brushed off in the New Age community, and it shouldn't be instantly diagnosed as some sort of, you know, eugenics or like Hitler-esque philosophy, and it shouldn't be brushed off as some arrogant, egotistical dragon family bloodline trying to diminish your spiritual work, because I see that a lot in the communities. It's actually very important, and it's gotten a bad rep, and I don't agree with it at all. So I just wanted everyone to kind of hear my opinion and my philosophy on it, and if you disagree, that's fine. But I hope I've offered a little bit more clarity to that subject. Alright guys, thank you, and remember, check out www.adamabsinthe.com, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks. Hey everyone, tonight's video is going to be more so how I originally intended the video logs of mine to be. So it'll be less of a storytelling video and more of a conversation or a topic. So tonight I'm going to try to untangle this ball of yarn that has blended all together in the, I guess you can call it the New Age community. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started real quick. If you haven't done a lot of research on these subjects, it's not going to make a lot of sense, but what we see in our old records, like the Sumerian records, the cuneiform scripts, or the Bible in Genesis, they are the gods. And then later on we have the major world religions unifying everything into one god. But the Anunnaki instilled their genetic coding into us, and more so some of the creations, the human beings if you will, had a lot higher percentage of their DNA in their conversations go. You're going to hear a lot about reptilians, and a lot of the New Age sites have the reptilians being the satanic bloodline, and there are current world leaders in the Vatican, and da-da-da-da-da. I just want to take the word reptilian and the David Icke aspect and just remove it right now. Just forget about it. We'll go back to the Anunnaki, who are our creators. We are genetic experiments, or I shouldn't say experiments. At some point there was experimentation, but we're a genetic creation. And the Anunnaki are, if you have, I'm hoping to add some clarity. Again, this is just my personal opinion, and this is my belief system at the moment. And it's good to note that when you watch videos like this, that no one has the answers regardless of what they want to believe. And if they think that, it's a lot of ego and they're not really speaking from their higher self. So keep an open mind, and I'll get started right now. So basically, we have a bunch of stuff as far as the Starseed blood, and others had a lot less. So this way you would have the shepherds of mankind, you would have these otherworldly beings, the Anunnaki, who I don't believe came from another planet like the Zechariah Sitchin people think. I think Nibiru is not a planet, but a doorway, like to the other world. So you have these mediums, these people who are kind of the go-betweens between them and our current 3D reality. So